It does make me feel sad about it though. I get irritated with myself because I don't know what's wrong. Like I said, I just have this foreboding, feel bad feeling sometimes. I can't root it in something, so it makes me feel helpless. You know what I mean? I'm sure you guys have felt that. It just makes me feel helpless because, like, if I don't know what it is, I can't really do anything about it. Like, how do you process a feeling when you don't even know what you're feeling or why you're feeling it? Like, how does that even work? You know? And then it just lingers for days and weeks. It's like, gosh, what is it? What is it? Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of an interesting thing, and this actually, there are certain what I would refer to as personal evidences. All right, I know that perhaps they're more subjective. Maybe I'll use the term subjective. They're a little more subjective, but evidences of sort. You know, when like Scripture talks about that there's sin, that you're going to struggle with sin, be like, wow, I mean, that fits perfectly. That makes a lot of sense out of my own life. You know, I'll go from one day where we have a 24-hour adoration chapel. Eucharist adoration. I'll go there for an hour, and I'll do some devotions and pray the rosary and stuff like that, and then I'll go to the gym for an hour and try to stay fit, be a little bit more balanced with everything, and then I'll have like a day or two that's like I can't seem to drag myself to do any of those things. These are like things that I committed to do on a daily basis. Like if one had committed themselves to, okay, I'm just going to read a chapter from the New Testament and just pray, just do a devotion or something like that. Not a lot, just a little bit. And then like find yourself really struggling to get yourself to do those things. 3 a.m. Well, it's 3:38 here. So, yeah, if you're awake at this time, then yeah, I guess that's a thing. No, I work third shift, so on my days off, I retain my schedule. So I'm awake. I'm awake. I think another thing that bothers me is not these kind of moments where it seems like for a day or two I go off the rails, but the let's see, what was my point there? Oh, one thing I find annoying is emotions. I tend to want to like wake up, go to work, do my stuff, come home, have my day off, do whatever I want. But every now and then, I'll realize that my daily routine, the way I think, the things that I do, they aren't conducive Um, actually, it's. I'm just talking about feelings in general right now. I haven't felt good the last couple days. I've told myself I need to talk about my feelings more. And what'll happen is that okay, every day seems to just flow. Everything seems to be fine. Everything's good, and all of a sudden, I'll start feeling a certain way. Like it may have been something in a TV show. I have a good one on that. Yeah, I guess so. Like an emotional wrench gets thrown in that kind of throws off the normal routine. But I don't know where the wrench came from. Sometimes I can't even identify the wrench. Like, what kind of wrench is this? Right? Like, and so now I'm having to, instead of spending time on the daily things that I want to spend time on, now I have to try to figure out or try to feel through something. It just, I don't know if it's my autistic tendencies, but I guess I just don't live out of feelings. Like, I'm not saying I should live out of my feelings more, but I do think if I was more balanced, I guess, and that I was more open to just to my humanity. I'm not like just a floating intellect, right? I'm not just a talking head. I'm a whole person, you know, and there are feelings involved, but I think I ignore them. And then I get annoyed anytime I feel anything that requires my attention. I have not heard of Galatian Trap. I don't know. Yeah, caring for myself. Yeah. The thing is, I think in a way that the more a person learns how to actually care for their own self, it puts them in a better position to be able to care more for others. I know, for instance, that I'm difficult on other people because I'm actually difficult on myself. What would I say? Well, I mean, I'm kind of familiar with the story. It's like you just point at Jesus, right? You know, the blood of Jesus cleanses from all sin. You know, I mean, it's the cross of Christ is the sole meritorious cause of our salvation. I mean, there's nothing more for me to look to than that. Of course, there's always more, but you know, there's that foundation. You know, so some may be familiar with the language of just resting, right, at the you know, just rest at the foot of the cross. Sometimes you just need to just throw yourself down there and just rest. There's a neat passage I like, and where it talks about the anybody who is weary and anxious, you know, should come to him, and he will give you rest. You know. So it's a chapter because you're never good enough to earn your place with God. I mean, there are times where Paul's language is very, very strong. Like when he says, and he lists all these things that people could do, and he's like, you know, don't you know that none of these will enter the kingdom of heaven? And of course you can't take it out of context, you know. It's um, because there's the passages in First John that talk very clear, you know, that, you know, if you claim to be without sin, you know, you call God a liar, you know. But rather it's the blood of Jesus that cleanses from all sin, right? It's the He cleanses us from all unrighteousness, right? It's the you can't claim your sin away. You can't. Claim to be better than you are. You just have to throw yourself upon the mercy of God. Basically, what it comes down to. I try to remind myself of those things. You know, I know it's not. You know, you have to be X amount of good, for instance. But I think at the very least, or a good place to start, even, you know, is to, if there's grave matter in one's life, you know, it's a good idea to be freed of those things. You know, it's a good place to start. Grave matter. Because or things you think are grave matter, because those things can be the basis of actual, like, mortal sin, you know. Yeah, you know what's interesting is that when I was between the ages of 10 and 17, that was a really difficult stretch. Did a lot of stupid stuff. Looking back now, like 20 plus years later, I think I'm more lenient with myself because I understand how I got to the places that I did. And sometimes not even quite realizing the consequences to some of those choices I made way back when. And so I try to remind myself of, you know, I did a lot of damage to myself during those period of time. So I need to be more gracious, more merciful towards myself. Yeah. Those things certainly are true. But I know there's, for me, there's that definite, just basic work of treating myself like a human being, you know, knowing there's that emotional component there, and I'm not very good at that. So yeah, it might require more attention or more focus on my part than it might for somebody who is better at those things, more emotionally mature, maybe. Yeah, sometimes I try to what's the word? Think that there's nothing wrong, you know, where I'm okay and it's disconnected from where I've come from, because I came from a fairly unstable home, and sometimes I don't give myself enough credit, for some of the strides and things that I've made in my life, you know. I don't know, it's like some of those things that like were very damaging. And sometimes I like to think that I'm like past those things, beyond, you know, like I'm immune now. Like those things won't bother me anymore, or I won't feel anything as a result of any of them, or there are no longer any residual effects from them, and then I have that tendency to deny the whole effect of the thing, and that's actually not the way I should be looking at myself, you know. You know, I have to be honest about where I've come from, and be honest that it created certain weaknesses, it created certain vulnerabilities, certain that made me strong in these ways, but made me more susceptible in these other ways. So I didn't have a stable home, so I didn't mature emotionally as well as I could have, and I feel the effects of that today. I feel a little bit emotional and I'm overwhelmed by it. And half the time I can't even identify what it is, what the source of it is. It's just there. So I can't, how am I can't process it, so it doesn't go away. It's annoying. It's annoying. Sometimes I think that the reason why I go through certain bouts of obsession is because I'm trying not to think about how I'm feeling. Like I want to like throw my thinking into something and focus on it so much so that I can just ignore the feelings I don't know what to do with. I don't even know what they are, or why they're there, or where they came from. So I think I have a tendency to obsess over thinking, use my intellect as a way of, as a kind of compensatory behavior, so to speak. Think ourselves out of feelings? Yeah, it doesn't work, but I continue to labor under the delusion that I can. No matter how much I tell myself that emotional problems require an emotional solution. You can't think your way out of it. I mean, there's the cognitive part of the cognitive, emotive, therapeutic method of like talking through things, feeling through things, and having it work together. You know what I mean? That kind of process. But the thing is I'm out of joint. There's a disconnect, so to speak, between the powers of the soul, right? I think that's that's another thing that sin does, is it kind of disorients and disconnects, disorders the person. So I'm not always leading with the intellect, or let me get caught up here. Larry Elder said something profound. A lot of folks were born on third base and they think they hit a triple. That's actually kind of nice. That's good. Most of the time I beat myself up when I think of the past. Most of the time I'm in fear, paranoid, is the future tripping. Tell myself I can't worry about an issue until a certain time or day. Hey, Cookies. Welcome. Cookies for everyone. Cookies for everyone. And Famous is buying. Well, The thing I was obsessing about a few days ago, Nick, actually was I wanted to fully understand the philosophical threads that have kind of given shape to our present age. Right, so we have the zeitgeist, the spirit of our age, and we have 70 years of stuff that the philosophical movements and things that ended up shaping our educational institutions, how it shaped how we came to think and stuff. You think things are bad now. Just we'll wait to see how things are 50 years from now, maybe even 70 years from now, with the kinds of things that they're teaching. Things are only going to get worse. Thankfully, there's that American patriotic thread that continues to hold a firm line against like communism and things like that, but there's stuff going on now that's seeding the culture, so to speak, that once was in the universities in some obscure corner somewhere, and now it becomes kind of like a mainstream thing. But anyways, I digress. I kept having these obsessive thoughts about writing a book, and each chapter would focus on a different philosopher and how it has contributed to this what's the phrase, ruthless criticism of everything, and how that has really eroded traditional values and more Aristotelian ways of thinking and so on and so forth. Sometimes I think about the future. Oh, questioning the experts and educated. The thing is I think that we're going to continue to see both. These two regimes in constant tension with each other. So yeah, people want to pull their kids out of school or not send them to that college, or there's things that we can do. Well, I think, in a way, the kind of new atheism of like Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens, and I always forget the third guy. I think people kind of saw a kind of intellectual dishonesty about their brand of atheism. There's even atheists who are like, yeah, that wasn't good. Dennett or Bennett. Dennett. Okay, yeah. Yeah, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Yeah, there actually are, atheists out there who are much fairer to their craft of like debate and philosophy and stuff. I don't remember. Oh, there was this guy. He debated Trent Horn on the existence of God, and he was. It was a good conversation. It was a good conversation. And I think Trent Horn kind of gave a really good argument about it's not enough for an atheist to stand up there and be like, no, I'm an atheist because I'm not convinced by your arguments for theism. Trent says, you can't let them sit on this line of disbelief. You have to get them to prove naturalism, right? You have to posit something, make a positive statement for what it is that you actually believe, as opposed to just making a denial statement of something that you don't believe. That's insufficient. You actually have to give good reasons why you're a naturalist and why you maintain the proposition that ultimate reality merely consists of matter, motion, space, and time. I mean, you have to make an argument for that. And I don't think that's something that the so-called New Atheism did. I think they simply just used rhetoric and narrative to just cast religion. And, well, I don't even like using the term religion, because technically naturalism is a religion of its own. They're just different philosophical systems. So, I tend to try to avoid the term, because in a sense, yeah, whatever. I gotta get caught up. Dennett once sat through WLC giving a presentation of the ontological argument. He stood up after and said, "I can't see any issue with the premises, and the form is sound, but when you see a conclusion you know is wrong, there must be an issue somewhere." Yeah, that's an interesting kind of double talk, isn't it? Maybe double talk is the bad thing. He's basically saying, okay, you have this syllogism. Well, with the ontologic argument, though, I think the ontological argument is more of a inductive argument, isn't it? That's starting with something specific and arguing for something more general, correct? If I recall, it's not like the Kalam cosmological argument that is deductive, right? So you basically have a syllogism such that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe had a cause, therefore the universe began to exist. I'm probably saying that wrong. Yeah. Everything that begins to exist had a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. That's what it is. There's still something about that argument that just... I think it still needs more. Because you could still attempt to answer that argument. Who was it? A guy was... He was an atheist. Oh, no, actually he was more of an agnostic, and he brought up the argument that, okay, yeah, I can maintain that the universe had a cause. But how do we know our universe isn't just a bubble universe? You know, and that it's that his argument was is you know maybe our universe came from enough energy being trapped in a black hole that it exploded into its own universe, and this happens to be the universe in which we're in which he posited an ever I'm trying to remember what he argued for in terms of like probabilistic arguments that yeah there's just this I don't think I think when it comes down to it is you could at least deny that God is the cause. I mean, I kind of find the necessary being conception argumentation, the argument from contingency to be very good. And yeah, this idea of positing other universes and stuff is, well, hypothetical. I mean, you can't really prove that, so you're having to put some sort of faith or belief into something you can't prove. You know, and that way you don't have to go to any sort of like oscillation theory or anything like that. But what was my point? Oh yeah, the ontological argument and Harris's finding something about that line of argumentation to be. I think in some ways the theist can demonstrate that it would not be absurd if there were a God. I think in that in its own way is justification for the belief. If we can demonstrate that it. Yeah, so so instead of formulating the argument to be, oh, I'm going to set out to convince you that God does positively exist. Simply just shoot down any objection to it that attempts to prove by means of reason that it's absurd. If all of those objections can be rebutted, yeah, I'm trying to think through this while I talk. I think it's enough. Yeah, let me. So you said that the ontologic argument is deductive. It merely explains what is entailed by a coherent thing that exists by its own aseity. But I don't know if we're talking about the same argument, though. Are we talking about that idea, which is greater than any that can be conceived in the mind, and since it is greater for a thing to exist outside of the mind than merely in the mind, therefore there is a God? Are we talking about that same ontological argument? Fear of the future became much stronger. I could see that being a thing, because it's only really within a theistic framework that you can posit things like providence, right? Divine providence, the idea that all our hairs are numbered and nothing happens outside of God's permissive will, and we're cradled in meaning, so to speak. But when you don't have that, anything could happen. Anything could go. The only wills that exist are what you think your own free will is. But once again, from a naturalistic standpoint, free will gets kind of deterministic in some ways. It can get kind of rough. You know, that's enough to bring horror. Think if you got a disease and then died, what's without meaning? It means nothing. It kind of reminds me of this. What was it? This. It was a DC comic cartoon where this bad Batman in this other dimension wanted to travel to Earth Prime, where I guess all other dimensions had branched off from, and if he were to destroy that dimension, it would just destroy all reality altogether. So this was the idea in the cartoon. But he was very nihilistic. But at the end, he fails his objective, and his bomb goes off, and it kills only him. And once he realizes it's going to go off, he's like, it doesn't matter. Even his failure to achieve his master plan is like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's got to be difficult trying to think and feel and live under the influence of those philosophical notions. You know, I think our culture suffers a great deal. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't troubling things that a person could struggle with, even within theism, because there's a question of, well, even if you could prove that there's a God, is this God cruel? Is he, maybe he allows suffering to occur because he causes it to occur, and he's just watching it and enjoying it. I mean, you could posit anything you want if you're working with a blank slate, you know. I'm not saying you could. I find that convincing, you know, because if there's a God, I think he does have to have certain attributes, or it just, I think it breaks down. I don't think you can have a malicious God. That certainly would be an interesting conversation to have. Yeah, money and success can't really do it for you. Yeah. Well, that's cool to hear, Redmond. There's a lot to be said the way a person thinks when they wake up in the morning and they honestly believe that there's a God of holy love who cares for you, has purpose for your life, stuff like that. I'm not saying that people can't do bad things in the name of theism. I mean, we've seen all kinds of wars and other things occur as a result. I wouldn't blame theism for that. I would blame bad philosophy for that. Yeah, that's how I would approach it. Opsi's idea that the universe is eternal and in constant change. I don't think that makes sense. Self-existent things don't change. Right. We're talking about, why does something exist as opposed to nothing existing at all? You would have to at some point have something that is necessary. Now, what is this necessary thing? Well, a necessary thing can't be contingent, because contingent things had the potentiality to exist and not exist. But that would violate, there being something that is necessary. So we know if there had been nothing at all, there never would be anything. Ex nihil nihil sit. From nothing, nothing comes. So there always had to have been a something. So the question then is, okay, we've gotten that far. What is this something? And so we would have to say, it has to be something that always has been. It has to be something that is necessary. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. Because if, for instance, everything that existed had the potentiality not to exist, then it would have actualized that potentiality a long time ago, so to speak. That's the argument. But I don't see that being a thing, especially when you posit an eternity past. This has never been actualized, right? And even then, you can't even get to that argument, because you're already positing that if a thing has any potentiality at all, it's contingent, and contingent things at one time did not exist. They had to be actualized. I mean, like a true nothing, right, isn't going to produce anything. So yeah, I mean that there is anything at all, I would argue means that it's that there is something that is necessary. So I'm not just creating some kind of philosophical category out of whole cloth, and if we've gotten that far by means of reason, if we're willing to accept that much, we would have to say, okay, if we see anything at all, anything that is perceivable by the five senses, is by definition contingent. So at this point, you begin to craft a theistic philosophy that which is necessary wouldn't have any of the attributes of contingency. It wouldn't be material. It wouldn't be perceptible. It wouldn't be like some people well, if God would just show himself in front of me, it's so convenient to have this pink elephant, this invisible pink elephant. And it's very crude, and they're not really being fair to the. Well, remember, we've just reasoned to this necessary thing, and it can't have any of the attributes of contingency, or it wouldn't be necessary. All right. So you're not gonna have something that you can perceive. This necessary something is not going to be something you can perceive. So it is what we would refer to as immaterial or spirit, pure spirit, because it doesn't have parts. All right, it's not composed of different things. You start going down that road, you all of a sudden you have a and you start developing by means of reason the attributes of necessity. So this something would be pure actuality. Pure actuality. Unchanging. And because we aren't part of the necessary thing, then we can begin making arguments that this something actually has a will to impose upon nothing, so that it would become contingent things. I tend to kind of, when I think about it that way, I find those kind of lines of argumentation to be quite good, especially when you bring in Anselm's ontological argument, right? Where you begin to think, well, what is the grandest conception the human mind could conceive? Well, I meant a necessary being who would be eternal, unchanging, the uncaused cause of all causation. Infinite, right? That there are no limits, that there can't be any limits. And you can reason to each of these things and think, well, wow, this is the grandest conception of the human mind, because you can't get bigger or more grander than infinite. You can't get any grander than necessary. I think that the force of the ontological argument is that what's interesting is that this grandest, highest conception of the human mind conveniently fits with just reflecting on what we've been talking about in terms of necessity and why there is something rather than nothing. Oh, that's convenient. Why should this be the case? That human reason can conceptualize such a thing? It's almost like an intellect made everything in such a way that intellects could perceive it. The logos, reason, in which we participated. I think that's also an idea too, like when, in terms of feeling like God's in charge of everything. Because if God really wanted to, he could just withdraw himself from contingency, and everything would slip right back into the nothingness from which it came. I could simply disappear. If God were not at this very moment willing my participation in being. Well, I mean, that's kind of yeah, I guess somebody could be kind of scared of that if you didn't really trust God's motives and whatnot. But it's also, I didn't have to exist. One of the reflections and Introduction to the Devout Life by gosh, what's his name? It's not Francis de Sales. Ah, I can't remember. Anyways, one of his reflections is that God brought us out of nothing. You know, and there's a reflection in that. We could have been nothing still. God in this very moment could just make you not exist. And we owe that to him. We can be thankful. I guess I'm not like troubled by, well, what would be some of the, oh, I forgot to change the title of my stream. I'm sorry. I've been sitting here with the wrong stream title for the last couple hours. Oh. Sorry about that. I'm not trying to draw people here under false pretenses. I just forgot to change. I just didn't feel like playing my game tonight. I'm probably gonna take maybe a week off from everything. Stay off the internet and stuff. Alright, so let's get back to Nick's contributions. I think the ontological argument is broken up. Nihilism is crushing. Yeah. Now anytime I hear nihilism, I think of that movie, the Big Lebowski, where Walter, he's like, they're nihilists. Like just saying that is like a complete explanation for, why we should find these people disturbing. And that they would be willing to do anything for whatever they want. I think it's maybe what the concern is, but yeah, Walter saying that. Just a leaping off of the argument, it says, if such an idea is coherent and must exist in reality, if an idea is coherent. Well, actually, that reminds me of, can you have an actual infinite? Like, I've heard it was a conversation between Jimmy Akin and like we can conceptualize infinite, right? So in the abstract, right, you can have an infinite, but can you have an actual infinite? It was an interesting conversation. I'm sorry, it was Jimmy Akin having a conversation with William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig thinks that you cannot have an actual infinite, and Jimmy Akin, arguing from the perspective of Thomism, argued that God could cause a thing to exist that has always existed. Here, let me get caught up because I think Redmond asked a question. That a conceivable self-existent thing entails that thing exists. Well, I think sometimes it's not so much one particular argument for the existence of God that has the full weight of, oh my gosh, that's it. I think it's just a bunch of planks, right? I think there's a now, of course, actually being a theist and looking at those arguments for the existence of God from the perspective of one who already accepts the premise or the conclusions, we enter into those conversations with the conclusion in mind. That's not to say that it's everywhere and always biased, because somebody could, like, if somebody already believes in God, the arguments for the existence of God, those rational demonstrations would just support them. It would help rectify their thinking. But I actually find some of those arguments as I laid out from, and I need to explore that a little bit more, because I think Leibniz wrote quite a bit about the argument of why is there something rather than nothing, and then worked from there. I just like the idea that if anything exists at all, requires now that there be a thing that exists necessarily. The other thing I was thinking about, Matt Fradd made a comment. This is somebody asked him this question, and the question was, can an accidentally ordered causal chain be the cause of a essentially ordered causal chain? And the answer is yes. But I'm wondering if, was the question asked to undercut the argument? So when it comes to the existence of contingent things, there's the argument that not only is there this accidentally ordered causal chain, like where I am my son's father, but if I die, he continues to exist. His continual existence is not dependent upon me, right? I was an accidental cause in that causal chain. But as far as the things that are ordered per se, or the essentially ordered causal chain in being, so to speak, that God's cause of contingent things is not just a cause accidentally, like it occurred and then bam, everything's just all on its own, so to speak. But in the order of being, it's a cause that continues to be the cause, right? If God ceases to be that cause, everything would just cease to exist. It's a divine conservation. It's the idea that we don't have existence within ourselves. We receive it from something outside of ourselves. Within us, existence and essence are distinct. I like some of those lines. I'm way behind. I'm trying to get caught up here. Let's see. What do you think you would need? There's a rational part and an experience part. There is, because you can argue for the existence of God all day long, but what kind of God is that who never enters your life? Who never reveals himself anywhere? Who never relates It never is involved. I mean, you might as well just be a deist. You know, God kind of put things in motion, then he's off doing what in La La Land. To what end? No miracles, no this, no that. Yeah, I really can't. I really can't get into that. I mean, a God who's willing to create in such a way that we are the result of this, of his creative will. That such a something is not relational. Yeah, I mean, just if theism were the cause of all conflict, which is not, but I would say that theology is the all human conflict is ultimately theological, right? It would seem a pretty simple thing to lock the barbaric theists outside your gate of perfect peace. If you understand the moral argument, you know that there is no possibility of an untrustworthy. Yeah. So, like, as I was saying before, you know, I mean, if somebody were to bring up the objection, well, okay, that's all fine and good. You know, you've posited that a God exists, but you know, can we know anything about this God, even if he doesn't reveal himself at all? And you know, in which case I would propose that it's not God's nature to be perfectly obscure. He's also the God who reveals. Oh, it's okay that you didn't mention the title, Nick. That's fine. I agree with the Judeo-Christian contention that the world is good, as I understand it. I think the biggest issue people have when they feel God is distant is that they want to be the star of reality, the mark of righteousness. They aren't actually rebelling against the evil in the world, but against God's plan in which they are only a small part. Yeah, the world doesn't evolve around me. Yeah, it doesn't revolve around me. If I cease to exist this very moment, everything would carry on as it always has. Doesn't revolve around me at all. Yeah, things just continue to go. I've buried enough family members to know very well your stuff just gets dispersed and everything just carries on. Just carries on. Alright. The sort of nihilism we were talking about, or moral nihilists, I believe there's nothing really good or evil. We might like marriage and hate rape, but neither is objectively better than the other, according to nihilists. At that point, it's just social contract. You know, we get a group of people together to agree on certain things, and the goodness of it is only good as far as it creates a bond between peoples. It's a beautiful life. It's a beautiful life, or are you talking about It's a Wonderful Life? Oh, I just see that you gotta leave in 10 minutes, so you said that. Alright, yeah, you'll be gone in a couple more minutes. Well, I'm not saying I'm not saying that social contract is. I'm just saying that, if there wasn't anything, right? We're just talking about hypothetical. I haven't even argued whether or not that hypothetical is even a possibility. In which case, why even bring it up, all right? But in my absurd hypothetical, all right, in my irrational imaginings, I suppose somebody could say, well, at the very least, you can have a social contract between a couple people. See, Redmond says, when I lost faith, I really turned to science for all the answers. Why we exist, creation, etc. There is a lot of really good evidence that can be seen. But in the end, there is a lot of missing pieces, and I have a couple of God shots when I asked to have him back in my life. There's even though it's been taboo for certain scientists, and even under pressure and being ostracized in universities and stuff for positing intelligent design, for example. Sometimes they can just be treated differently. What? You believe in intelligent design? You believe there's an intellect behind everything? How dare you? You have to reject that in order to be scientific. Like, wait, what? Where does it say that anywhere? Hey, welcome in. Velato. It doesn't say that anywhere. Science is just observing things. It's just empiricism. It's just what we can perceive in the five senses and gather our data. It makes no ontological claims about itself. It makes... Okay, so... Follow this. Methodologically, as a methodology, empiricism is just science. We're just observing things, gathering data. We formulate hypotheses and observe phenomena, and render hypotheses concerning said phenomena. Yeah, all of that stuff. But that's different than making an ontological claim that ultimate reality merely consists of matter, motion, space, and time. No, you're studying those things. But how do you jump from a scientific method to an ontological claim? Why is that? Well, why is there even an ontological claim? The second thing would be the epistemological claim that this is the only means by which we can know things. Wait. No, as a method, scientific method is just simply observing things. There aren't any epistemological claims that this is the only way by which we might know, and is making no ontological claims that this is all that there is that exists. Those are totally different things. Those are totally different things. But I think they've gotten wrapped up into a single scientism. And I think that is a mistake. The conflict thesis, yeah. So when he's saying conflict thesis, he's talking about that there's a conflict between science and faith, for instance. And what actually ended up happening when people think in terms of conflict is they're looking at the young Earth creationists, Earth created in 6 days kind of things. The Earth is 6,000 years old, and the Darwinian evolutionary natural, selection through random. What's the term? Natural selection through random occurrences, something like that. And unfortunately, because that had been polarized within that particular what's the term framework, that's kind of skewed the conversation, but really like faith and reason, science and religion doesn't have to conflict. In fact, there are some who've gone as far as a kind of faithism, fideism it's called. It's the idea that faith doesn't have to be justified by reason or can't be, and that everything is just the fideists have completely divorced faith. Because here's the thing, there are two things. There's two things. There's the Credo ut intelligam, I believe, in order that I may understand, conception, that we come to see things through the eyes of faith, but that we also bring everything that we see with our eyes into the broader conceptualization of how we perceive things. I don't want to say that we're constructing a worldview. I don't want to use more post-modern language, but more in terms of that faith isn't making claims, right? Faith isn't making claims that are going to be contradictory to nature, though some do in fact do that. They ignore nature, they ignore genetics and science and biology, and they'll just set all that aside in preference for an ideology. You've been accused of a fideist before? I've been accused of being a modernist twice when I was in college. I was accused of being a modernist. Like one time, and it didn't make any sense to me why I was called a modernist. I think they were mistaken. But on one occasion, I was talking to my professor. It was the theology professor about the incorruptibles, the phenomenon that sometimes some of these saints, their flesh isn't corrupting at a normal rate, right? They're referred to as the incorruptibles. They're not quite sure why it happens, I guess. And I said, well, what do you do with the incorruptibles? He says, well, what do you mean? I don't tend to think about them. And I said, well, they're there. You gotta do something with them. And he's like, spoken like a true modernist. I'm like, what's that supposed to mean? I thought that was quite weird. Like, how does that make me a modernist? Because you gotta do something with it. I don't know. Let's see. Velato said, when I was atheist, I struggled with how matter and energy were created and how non-life created life. Yeah, so how does living, like, okay, sure, yeah, we could posit what conditions would have to be true for an amino acid to be formed. Okay, fine. I remember that being a big thing, like, well, at some early part after the earth cooled enough to be able to sustain life, there was more methane, there was these chemicals, and there was lightning, and then you had amino acids. Like, okay, you haven't done anything yet. These amino acids have not ordered themselves to form a protein, nor is there any mechanism for DNA to no duplication of genetic data, which is the DNA is just a long chain of four different amino acids just ordered. Like why or how there came about to be a mechanism. That question's a bit tougher, isn't it? There's no reason for a mechanism. There's no reason for there to be an amino acid. Under certain conditions there might be an amino acid, but there's no really reason for one to be there in a blind process. So how you go from meaningless chemicals to a meaningful process of, you know, well, I mean, that's the atheistic argument. Theirs is, well, you know, evolution must be true because it happened. Here we are. Like, no, wait, calm down. You know. Now that's not to say it's not. Now, I will. So people don't charge me with a kind of God of the gaps error here. I think God created all that there is. Everything that's contingent comes from that which is necessary. Now, God created everything out of nothing. Ex nihilo. Creatio. Ex nihilo. Creation from nothing, out of nothing. But as to interventions in nature, well, I mean, if we propose that miracles have ever occurred, which I think the resurrection of Christ is a pretty strong evidence of that. Means that, you know, it wouldn't be absurd or unreasonable to believe that God was more involved at certain stages of everything, even if he created everything in such a way that it was spring-loaded, so to speak, so that when the Big Bang happened, if that's how it happened, that everything would be just right. You know, the four fundamental forces of the universe being just as they are. Gravity, electromagnetism, the weaker and stronger force, nuclear forces, are such that an atom can even exist, or that we can have more than just hydrogen. You know, everything's on a razor's edge in the sense. You know, everything's been like spring-loaded, so to speak. I find it interesting that people talk in terms of like probabilities and stuff along those lines. But yeah, I digress. And that, you know, our solar system seems fairly new. The Milky Way seems fairly new, isn't it? I don't remember. It depends on what you mean by new. They say that there's a couple of mysteries or gaps in some of this. One would be that life not only appeared on this planet, but shortly after its cooling, like very early. Like we're not talking about, you know, millions of years, if I recall, that basically as soon as the Earth was cool enough to sustain life, there was life. Or shortly thereafter. I don't remember the absurd number of calculations that people put together for something I can't observe. Create everything with a history. Yeah, that would be kind of like a special creation kind of thing, that it can come into existence aged, for instance. Now, I don't think that is necessarily a theory, because depending on where you think Adam and Eve came from, you know, some people think they just kind of popped into existence. They didn't as babies. Here you go, Adam. There's a bag of seeds and a diaper. That's No. I do think that there was a historical Adam and Eve. I maintain monogenism. Yeah, yep. The God created everything last Thursday. I don't find that convincing, though. I don't even see it as a good thought experiment, because I don't just have a memory of what happened last Thursday. I was actually there, right? I was there and I did those things. I'm not just remembering those here in this moment. That was this moment. It wasn't just a thought in the mind. It wasn't just some vague impression like a dream or something. It was, those impressions were actively being made upon my intellect in the moment and what is now. Shows that we have many beliefs that are based on evidence. Well, I mean, you can say that there's evidence. It was empirical at the time, right? So, last Wednesday, I had my water bottle. I filled it up. I was there. It was empirical. I think it begins to come down to the question of the continuity of the consciousness, right? There would be a disconnect between a consciousness that has memories of something, like the imagination, like just had something pressed upon it but wasn't really true. And they've actually played this out in movies where an alien race tried to give you false memories, right? You've probably seen movies where the aliens give you false memories, but there's this experiential real disconnect, because your soul didn't experience it, right? It's just things that have been impressed upon the brain and the memory. So I think maybe this also has to do with how we conceptualize the human person, I think we have an immaterial soul so that we can be knower and known. And I think that we would be able to know within our nature if we merely had certain neural pathways set up a certain way in the material brain versus the immaterial aspect of us that didn't or was not involved in the experience of those things. It's just carved into one aspect of our nature, and I think we would be able to break free of the illusion. Just like aliens doing the kind of mind altering, giving you memories and stuff. Those people will break free of it. Like in the Matrix, the whole thing is in the Matrix. Even though he's hooked up to the box, there's a part of him that you've been searching for, that you felt all your life. There's this, and what's interesting is that it's an aspect of the film that maybe some people don't philosophize about enough, is that we would be able to tell. At least some people, anyways. I would like to think that we all could. At some point, we would be able to recognize. But at the same time, these people are born that way. They don't know any different. Their human experience is just that. So even if it was in the case of Neo, this vague foreboding thing. All right. See, I've been becoming more religious lately, seeing how science facts and recent events can be altered so easy to push a narrative. I find that the less I trust the people who control our information, the more I trust the Bible. Well, at least with the Bible, we actually have like the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have all of these ancient texts that we can compare and study and have such a high degree of certitude on what the text consists of. Unless all of that is a lie. Well, I mean, gosh. It's kind of hard to make ancient texts and scrolls and parchment and stuff actually to really fabricate all that, which reminds me, like, who was it, Gary Habermas? He was talking about the Shroud of Turin, and he says he's about like 70% sure it's the actual shroud, but of all the scientists that have studied the shroud, we actually don't possess the technology to be able to fabricate what they're seeing there. If it was a fabrication or some medieval fabrication, we don't have the technology today. It does not exist. At least this was his reflection on the available data. I don't know what I think of it. I haven't spent much time on it, and it wouldn't have much. I guess it may. I think there's some people who've come to believe in the resurrection of Jesus because of their studying of the shroud. That could be a possibility for some people. So I guess for them it's kind of relevant. It wouldn't, whether it was or wasn't, wouldn't change my what I've concluded. So I guess I haven't put much weight into it, I suppose. But nor do I think I need to really study it, even for the sake of evangelizing, because there's plenty of studies and stuff. If somebody's interested in it, they can just look up Shroud of Turin and start doing a deep dive. Look at arguments for or against. Look at all the, not just what people have to say about it, but what data have we actually collected and know for sure. Stuff like that. I think that's a deep dive for somebody else, I think. Who knows? Maybe 10 years from now I get a study bug and I start diving into that question. But it would be more just for fun, I think. Just some temporary interest study topic. I haven't compared searches between Google and DuckDuckGo, but yeah, sometimes I wish my understanding of some aspects of Catholicism were better. Is there something that you don't understand the least? I can help clarify. I won't do it in a convincing kind of way. I'll just present clarity. Not to convert, but to inform. I only clarify that because one time I had a friend who I was becoming Catholic at the time. I was actually in the midst of my studies and stuff, and I had a friend who was Nazarene, and his brother was Catholic, but was living an immoral life, so that kind of threw him off. But I remember sitting down with him. I said, "Hey, I would like to kind of share some of my ideas and why I'm doing this and why I'm studying these things." And he said, "No, I don't want you to share that information with me because it's always going to be a way of trying to convince me to think otherwise than I do." Like, okay, so gosh, I guess he really doesn't want to be my friend. You can't even have conversations. Alright, like, I know the reasons behind the wardrobes and whatnot. Oh, okay. But it just seems like tradition. I don't like acting on tradition. Oh, you mean like liturgical garb? Yeah, that doesn't have to be there. I'll respond to that. And actually, I'll just talk about the liturgy. So one of the things that's more unique, you might have some high church Anglicans, but like the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic, the entire cathedral or the churches are designed, and the liturgy as well, that it appeals to as many of your senses as possible. So you have the incense, you have the ringing of the bells during the words of consecration, you have the liturgical garb that the priest wears, which if he's acting in persona Christi, he's acting in the person of Christ, and so on and so forth. There's wearing clothes that signify his role and what's going on in the Mass. So the theology of the Mass, all right, kind of just bleeds out of everything. All right, and so it's bleeding out of the stained glass windows, the statues, the iconography, the smells, bells, and everything. So the theology of the Mass is going to just be symbolized and be represented in everything that you could possibly see and experience, from the Gregorian chant, the Latin, just everything that has to do with it is going to be the theology of the Mass bleeding out of everything. So one could say that these are just ways in which theology is being expressed. So it's even difficult for me to say, well, we should just get rid of it or it shouldn't be there, because then all we're doing is limiting ways in which the theology can express itself to us. which is why I like all the trappings, so to speak, because I want the crucifix. I want to see Jesus on that cross, right? I want everything in there to just draw my senses to a reality beyond what we're presently experiencing. So, when I began thinking of it in terms of everything being a channel through which the theology of the Mass is being expressed and communicated, I wanted more, not less. I wanted more. All right, let me get caught up here. All right, let's see. So Nick responded, "Hey, Nick's still here." So I think a lot of Catholics agree with you. A lot? Yeah, it might be possible. But just because something has been done a certain way doesn't mean... Well, yeah, I mean, there's been liturgical adjustments and stuff, you know. The priest haircuts. Oh, yeah, those the papal tiaras. I always felt like the goal should be to follow the Bible. The extra stuff and cosm turns me towards just Oh, okay, I see the word non-denominational Christianity. Okay, well, here's an interesting take, and if you look at the book of Revelation, okay, we see depictions of Christian worship around the altar, right? So you have the elders, you got angels with incense bowls, it's the prayers of the saints and everything, right? And you have all of these images of heavenly worship, right? You have a lamb that appears as though slain. You have an altar under which you have there's depictions of altars, of white robes, of candles, of incense, and there's a long list of them, of these depictions in the book of Revelation, because this is, you see all of these heavenly liturgies. Where you got the Old Testament saints, New Testament saints, you got angels everywhere, you got singing, holy, holy, holy is the God Almighty, which we actually sing in the Mass, right? That the holy, 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 that's in the Mass, because we are participating in the heavenly liturgy that is depicted in the book of Revelation. It's a very liturgical, and in that sense, that we have lampstands, we have that's all I can remember at the moment, but yeah, and so really, if you want a biblical argument, a biblical basis, for instance, for having all of these things in the liturgy, because we're participating in that heavenly liturgy. So we have altars, we have the Eucharist, right? We have the Lamb as though slain. We have the singing, right? We have the saints with us and the angels with us, and we're all worshiping together. We have incense and prayer, and participation. You have the four creatures who have eyes everywhere. I think it's the four living creatures. They're giving liturgical responses back and forth, and there's a real strong argument to be made, not only from there, but to look at how the early Christians worshiped. Because if you're looking to the New Testament to serve as the be-all and end-all of liturgy, Liturgy is lived. Liturgy comes from I think it's a Latin word that means the work of the people. I could be misremembering this. But the liturgy is the lived worship of the church. It's something that we would get glimpses of at the early church fathers as we see them in their worship, and how they were understanding the Mass, and how they had how they had the Word and Sacrament. You had part of the Mass with the readings, and then you had the part of the Mass with the Eucharist and all of that stuff. And the Eucharist itself, wrapped up in this theology, this Lamb as though slain, it actually comes to us in the Eucharist, and we're receiving Christ from that altar on which it's offered to God, right? Because the sacrifice of Christ wasn't just dead on the cross, but that sacrifice is made alive. There's continuity between the sacrifice of the cross and the resurrected Christ. Christ still is, even to this day, that same sacrifice that bled on the altar of the cross, so to speak. And then when Christ ascends and he enters into heavenly glory and enters into the heavenly tabernacle, he's a continual, ongoing presence before the Father as that self-same sacrifice, who comes to us in the Eucharist. Let's see, I gotta get caught up here. Priest haircuts, extra stuff. Okay, yeah, I think my response to extra stuff was to talk about the early Christian liturgy and to talk about some of the liturgical images in the book of Revelation and the heavenly worship. See, Nick says, I think it's a mistake to think of Catholicism as extra. The Bible is just a collection of books. Started the Catholic Church, historically speaking. You didn't write a book, Bible. Yeah, so I mean, there's this idea that Scripture has a material sufficiency. We find this in the early church fathers. Okay, that the New Testament and the Old Testament, including the Deuterocanonical text, are materially sufficient. And so, yes, I can, and talking about the liturgy and Christian worship, I can actually allude to the book of Revelation and talk about incense and candles and all of this stuff, right? As a biblical basis for. Some things might not be as explicit, like if you're looking for a passage that says, it's okay to play your guitar in church or something like that. I mean, it's not. You have to understand that Scripture isn't answering the questions that you have for it. It's giving you answers to questions that you should have. And I think that those are two different ways of approaching Scripture. We approach it to what it has to say to us, as opposed to trying to seek a particular answer. Because Scripture might not have been written with the intent to answer your specific question in this particular culture at this specific time. And I think it's unfair to do that with any sort of literature. Oh, I see. Nick's like, I can't leave if we're having conversation. Yeah. You can go when you need to. You can go when you need to. Kind of like setting the mood. Excuse me, sorry. Somehow it doesn't really work for you. like it always pushes me away, but I do understand it works for some, but not necessarily others. Oh, you mean like stained glass windows? You think that does that turn you off? Stained glass windows that depict scenes from Scripture, for instance. It's been referred to, those things have been referred to as the gospel of the poor, who could not read, but they could see depictions of Christ and his apostles and Mary and scenes in his life shown through art, from paintings to statues to iconography, stained glass windows. Everything communicates to it. Let me give you a good argument. All right. A good argument. Now, for instance, somebody might say, oh, look, they have Jesus on that cross. Jesus isn't on the cross anymore. They should take that down. That's offensive to Jesus. Well, I mean, number one, then don't put baby Jesus in the manger and the nativity scene outside of your church, then, if you're going to make that kind of argument. But that's too simplistic. When you read the crucifixion in Scripture, now, we can read, that's cool, right? But that may not have been the case, all right? So we're going to keep that in mind. When we read it, it creates images, pictures in our mind, right? We can see the story unfold. These words, these symbols, these sounds are conveying to us meaning that become pictures in the mind that correspond to the meaning to the event. There's a correspondence now between the meaning that's being conveyed. So when we read the crucifixion, we're not, wait, we gotta tear that out of our Bible now because it's creating an image in my mind of Jesus on the cross. No. The words, the written word, right, is communicating meaning. It's a vehicle for meaning. So for the gospel of the poor who can't read, those images that would be created in the mind by those jots and sounds that correlate to our reading and recognizing the meaning being conveyed is being conveyed through a different vehicle. All right, meaning can be as equally communicated through literature as much as it can through film, for instance, to use a modern like, so the Passion of the Christ, for example, we would say, we could read it or we could watch it, or a film artistic expression of the meaning. So I wouldn't tear out from Scripture the crucifixion narratives and argue, well, Jesus isn't on the cross anymore. I don't want to have that picture in my head. I don't want to have that picture on the wall. I don't want to think about Jesus on the cross, nor do I want to see it with my eyes. It would be kind of an absurd argument to make, if literature is not serving as a distraction to us, if the written word is conveying meaning to us, and it's not distracting us from the reality that it's trying to convey, why would a different vehicle be argued to be a distraction? Right? Why would that be conceived as a distraction? Literature? Okay. Crucifix on the wall? Not okay. Why is the artistic medium, why is the vehicle for communication being put into different categories that You know, we're only going to allow ourselves to picture the crucifixion in our mind when we read these words on this page, and we're not going to look at a crucifix on the wall to have the same effect. Just something to think about. Public work. I think Nick is talking about liturgy there. Public work, maybe. So my time with God is mostly spent by reading and studying the Bible, still in the Old Testament, prayer and talking to others, also trying to live a Christ-like life to the best of my ability. All those things are noble. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Absolutely. All of those things. Take everything that God has for you. Everything. Surround yourself with people who love Jesus. Surround yourself with things all through your house that bring your mind to the remembrance of the presence of God. Have something in every room. Don't have there be a room in your house that doesn't have something that directs and draws your mind to Christian things. Take anything and everything. Attend to all the means of grace. All the means of grace. And surround yourself with sacramentals. Anything and everything that can draw yourself to a sense of God in your life. Take it all. All of you for all of Him. Just all of it. The whole Christ. Everything. Job is your favorite biblical book. Job certainly is. Has much depth to it. Job has a lot of depth to it. Particularly when it comes to the question of why does it seem that at times the wicked flourish while the righteous are cut down in their prime. Among other things, I'm not reducing it merely to that. There's much more to it. Particularly God's response to Job at the end, where God goes on for 3 chapters or something. Very good. I need to read it again. I don't know what I would say my favorite biblical book is. It's difficult for me to pick one. It is very difficult just to pick one, isn't it? I don't think I've put much time to it, but if I were to answer that question based on, well, which book of the Bible have I read the most? That's actually the letter of 1 John. I've read the letter of 1 John more than any other. Nick says he's trapped. Usually don't get the opportunity to talk about this stuff. Yep, I know what you mean. Have a good night, Dragon Soul. Have a good night. I know that was 8 minutes ago when you said that, so sorry. Enjoy. Art dedicated to God is really beautiful. Yeah, things that are dedicated to the things of God can be very, very. You see, truth is beautiful too, isn't it? Right? You know, we talk about the good, the true, and the beautiful, and not only are we drawn to God because of truth, we are drawn to God because of beauty. And when we can capture that beauty through all means possible, you know, like for instance, you know, you were talking about earlier about setting the environment, so to speak. There is a sense in that. So, like, if you went to the Sistine Chapel, all right, art everywhere, and all of it is drawing us to the things of God. but it's the grandeur of the architecture, right? Not modern architecture, but the more ancient architecture, where the building itself is created in such a way to point to that reality. When you enter in, and there's just this grandeur about it, you have a sense that you've entered into a sacred space, you know. And that's good. That's good. The Latin Mass that I go to is like that. Very high ceilings, art all the way across and down. The altar is made out of marble that has a relic underneath it. All of it dedicated to God. All of it communicating the things of God. It's kind of hard for the mind to drift into common things when you're surrounded by uncommon things. Where no matter where your eyes look, you're being presented with the gospel. See, a lot of issues you have with Catholicism may actually just be accidental issues that aren't part of the core religion, just cultural norms. It could be. See. So more so, the incense and candles, chants, repeated prayers, all in the book of Revelation. When I pray, I say what's on my heart. Extemporaneous, that's cool too. Reading a script wouldn't do anything for me. It could. Okay, so there's what is called extemporaneous prayer, okay, where you just say what's on your heart. I'll just use adapt your language. My prayer life has actually been enriched by not freestyling it. Okay, you can still pray from the heart. All right, and it's something that might even take practice, for instance. But I do both. I use directed prayer, which, to be quite honest, already occurs in most Protestant churches. You have the pastoral prayer, you know, where he's the one who's praying, but he's leading the congregation in prayer, right? Which is already directed prayer in that sense, and is already kind of like a staple of Protestantism. I don't think I've ever been or have visited even a non-denominational church where there wasn't some directed prayer. Now, use the term script, but it's just a written directed prayer, right? So one of the benefits of reading prayers or reading reflections, I don't have it down here with me. The book that I'm reading, these reflections by Saint Alphonsus de Liguori, he'll give you a reflection on something, and then it immediately turns to prayer. Then you go back to reflection. It immediately turns to prayer. And I have actually found that my prayer life has been enriched because, well, once again, when you have a beautifully choreographed play, I'm not talking about Broadway, but I'm just talking about something that has been structured, has been thought through, and is the product of blood, sweat, and tears. And you finally see this beautifully choreographed thing. My wife was in marching band when she was in school, and if you ever seen some of these really cool marching band things, they're going in and out and they're all over the place, and it's all scripted, right? The whole thing is structured, but it's the final product of it that can draw us to pray in ways that we might be deficient in. For example, let me give you an example. Let's say somebody has the tendency, while freestyling it, right? Obviously, that play wouldn't be very good if it was freestyle. I'm not saying that extemporaneous prayer is equivalent to that. I'm just saying that it's okay to have some direction. It's okay. But what I am saying is that our praying can be enriched and balanced. All right, so not only is it enriched with really good form and structure, but it creates a balance where if people have the tendency to engage in supplication, okay, a type of prayer where we're asking God to give things to us, right? We could over time begin to drift towards predominantly certain types of prayer, such as do this for this person, do this for that person, do this for me. And I'm not saying that you're doing that, or I'm just creating a hypothetical person here, where an imbalance begins to occur. There's no praise. There's no there's no praise. This happened to me. I began, I was talking about a hypothetical, but actually I'm talking about myself. I had the tendency from my prayer life, to begin to drift into supplication. And I began to realize that I wasn't even praising God. I wasn't even thanking Him for who He is. And that actually created a spiritual disorder where I begin to love the gifts more than the giver, right? Because I was always coming to God for something. I was never giving something to Him. There was no sacrifice of praise, right? Now, once again, I'm talking about myself here. What directed prayer has helped me do is to help me not drift away, right, from those kind of pitfalls or those kinds of imbalances that can occur. The same thing the same can be argued for having a liturgical calendar. Someone will say, well, that's just ritual. The third Sunday of Lent has the same readings and this, that, and everything. But listen, have you ever been to a church where all they preach is about the end times? There's like this predominant flavor of Christianity. There are certain themes that the Seventh-day Adventists are seem to have this kind of end times rapture focus in their preaching. And those sorts of things can happen in any Protestant denomination, right? Without the structure can help bring balance to the kind of themes, not just the major things, but one Sunday a year we're going to talk about the Transfiguration. One Sunday a year or the Easter, the Christmas season. Do you know that Christmas actually just begins on Christmas Day? The Catholic liturgical calendar goes for another 6 weeks or something. Like the Christmas season begins at Christmas. See, the Lenten, the Advent season is for the whole month leading up to. And then the Christmas season is 6 weeks or more or something like that. It's it balances out the Christian life. It balances out the themes and the theology that is shared. It takes us all over in the Bible, not just pet sermons or someone who spends 3 months on the book of Romans or something. I mean, and I'm not saying that some of those things are bad. I'm just saying people who are driven by a more topical sermon kind of thing can end up bouncing around a lot more. I do like the more expositional, but having like an Old Testament, New Testament, gospel reading, there's so much scripture. There's so much scripture in the Mass. Half of the Mass is dedicated to the Word. The public reading of it and the homily, just all of that stuff. Anyways, I digress. I think having a balanced approach, not being afraid to enter into prayer with a saint, for instance, somebody who inspires Christ-likeness within us. The way they pray can become the way that we can pray. We could enter into their prayer. They may say things in a way that, oh my goodness, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. I never even thought of praising God like that. You know? And then what happens is over time, your extemporaneous prayer becomes enriched with new vocabulary, new focuses of prayer, a more balanced approach. And I think we can incorporate some of those things into our... See, just because... So think of it this way. Let's say you have a friend come over and you have a prayer meeting, right? Or maybe you have 5 or 6 people get together and you have a prayer meeting and you're praying together. They're praying and you're in agreement. You're praying, they're in agreement. Your hearts are in it. It's live. But also take into consideration that there are prayers that reflect the heart of a Christian expressing itself to God. Just as authentic when it was written. And so we could enter into those prayers. We can, beyond space and time, for instance, we can enter into prayer with them. We're praying together. These aren't just dead words on a page. This is a Christian heart expressing itself to God, and we're praying in agreement. Once again, I wouldn't draw a kind of false dichotomy and say, well, we can't have the pastor direct us in prayer because all prayer has to be extemporaneous. Or we can't pray in agreement with other people. We can hear it. We can hear it from the person sitting next to us, but we can't read it from the person who wrote it 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. I think there's kind of just a false dichotomy. Heck, you can get your friends together and you can incorporate some of those prayers in the midst of that as well. Because when you close your eyes, if somebody's reading a prayer off a piece of paper, or if they're just verbally extemporaneously praying, you don't know. Or maybe you can tell. I would argue that you can tell. And I think we can tell because sometimes written prayers are very well thought out. I think somebody had mentioned vain repetitions. It would be Nick. Vain repetitions, yes. That which is in vain. You see, somebody may hear the term vain repetition and they think that the repetition is in vain. But vain is actually qualifying the kind of repetition that it is. It's a repetition that is done out of vanity. They want to be seen for their many prayers, right? They're hypocrites. They're actors. But Jesus, when he was in the garden, prayed the same prayer over and over again. Lord, if it is possible for this cup to be taken from me, but not as I will, but as you will. I think he prayed that 3 times. Vain repetition? I would argue no. I would say that the cry of his heart through those words was as authentic the first time as it was the third time. And I don't think we should quibble about that. There are creedal statements. Yes, there are creedal statements. Yep, very important. Very important. I believe, for instance, I know I am not a Christian because I do not believe Jesus is God, but a Christian should seek to understand the statement that Jesus is God. Yeah, a Christian should understand the creed. So like the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed, the long form, understanding Christ of the same substance with the Father, that is homoousios, right? Consubstantial with the Father. Yeah, it's good to reflect on those things. Yeah. Fair points. I try to make fair points every now and then. Yeah. So yes, the idea of Jesus is God is always difficult for me, but I study this aspect and I certainly would never reject it. Yeah. This is one of my own personal lines of argumentation that I think of. This is my argument, the most relational thing that a relational God could do is to relate with us in the most relatable way possible. I'm sorry. While I'm talking, I'm thinking of the absurd amount of relation in my formulation here. I'm such a nerd. Yeah, okay, alright. Yes, so I think that the incarnation, right, the incarnation of God is the most relatable thing that God could possibly do. To enter into his creation, to become a man, or to take on human flesh, so to speak. So understanding the Chalcedonian declaration or definition, that the two natures are preserved, unmingled, unmixed, unseparated. I don't remember the exact definition, but yeah. It's good to know that he's fully God and he's fully man, and even from a Christian perspective, to make the argument that Athanasius made against the Arians is that Jesus is a perfect mediator between God and man because he is God and man. Right. That was his argument there. So keep up the study, Philato. Job is best read in one sitting. The list have an impact. Yes, there are a lot of things that are best read in one sitting. I could see how there can be difficulties in doing that. Like, I don't read very fast, so I think it would be kind of, I would have to dedicate like several hour block to be able to accomplish it. Maybe I should try it sometime. I could do a just reading stream where I just read the book of Job. I shall hang out with friends while I do it, right? Velato says, I see. Mistake wasn't, it wouldn't do anything for you, but I need to remember that it needs to also be for God. Yes, it needs to be for God, yeah. Yeah. Mick Christian. Relatable. Yes, relatable. Job isn't super long. But you're a slow reader as well. Okay. Let me think about this. I'm not saying it's a Protestant tendency, but it has been a tendency that has existed throughout the history of the church, the iconoclastic, the iconoclasts. Now, the Second Council of Nicaea, I think this was the Seventh Ecumenical Council, addressed that. They were basically destroying icons and stuff and all of that jazz, which was unfortunate. There's a scene in the movie Luther. This is the older black and white version. I've seen three versions of the life of Martin Luther. And in this black and white version, people went in and started looting the church. They started breaking the stained glass windows. I think this was like a Catholic church or something. And they were breaking the stained glass windows. They were doing all this stuff. And they knocked down a statue of Mary, and it broke and all this other stuff. And then Luther goes in there and starts preaching to them. And I remember very few things from that film, but I remember him leaning in and saying in a very stern fatherly voice about all the things that he does. He says, "You have even laid hands on the Blessed Mother. How dare you?" Right? How dare you? He was confronting a kind of iconoclasm that was occurring because of what he was teaching and doing. There were other people who were also doing things like Melanchthon and others who were really pushing that you couldn't even wear a crucifix and things like that. I think there's this tendency, all right, to be non-sacramental. Let me build this argument. Forgive me. It almost seems like a kind of Gnosticism where spirit is good and matter is evil. Where everything that has to do with our relating with God has to be my consciousness in the immediate interaction with the Holy Spirit is not only supreme but ultimate, and everything outside of that is deemed an idol or deemed evil in some way, that it's more holy to be in a office space with white walls than to go into one of the churches of Rome that are all decked out with everything screaming God at you. It's almost a kind of Gnosticism applied within the realm of the question of worship. It has to be direct, it has to be spirit only, and it cannot involve any matter whatsoever. Let me further this argument. The salvific work of God involved his creation, right? The incarnation becomes a kind of crux, how we begin to understand how God is taking matter and he's redeeming it with itself. Right? He takes on human nature and uses it to redeem humanity. It's both God and man. It's both the immaterial and the material. Christian worship needs to be an overflowing of this incarnational theology. When Jesus went down in baptism, the very act itself imbued water. It might not be the right word. Infused water with theological significance. Water now is part of that instrument, along with the words of baptism, that I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. That it becomes, in the words of Christ, that unless you were born of water and spirit, you have no life in you. That God set apart water to serve as a sacramental means, where both the material and the Spirit of God is working together in a single act. It's incarnational. Remember, the crux of which is the incarnation, the fullness of revelation, is that God gives redemptive value to creation. He uses his own creation to redeem. He uses a man to redeem humanity. When we think of the sacred, we think of things that are not just set apart for God, but means by which God himself has ordained for us. Peter, in I think it was 1 Peter, he talks about how the waters of the flood, right? He speaks about the waters of the flood and how Noah and his family was saved in the ark. And then it says, in the same way, baptism now saves you. The baptism now saves you. And this is why Jesus says that you have to believe and be baptized. You have to believe and be baptized. He draws water into the redemptive story. Right? I think that kind of Gnostic spirit good, my relationship with God must be pure spirit and not involve the truth of God's usage in the incarnation to draw us to more incarnational thinking. That God is going to work in and through and among all of these things. And the waters of baptism is a prime example. Right? It's not either or, it's both and. So, looking at the waters of baptism through Scripture, right? It is the washing of regeneration. It is the sign of the new covenant. It's the circumcision of the heart. Paul speaks very explicitly about this in Romans 6. About dying with Christ in baptism and arising in new life. I really think that the Gnostic tendency has drawn people away from incarnational thinking. And I think it is a mistake. Let me give you another example. Handkerchiefs that touched Paul. Okay, as soon as it touched Paul, it became a class 3 relic. And it was taken to the sick to heal them. Some people would be in the streets if only the shadow of Peter would cross over them in order to receive healing. The woman who touches the hem of the garment that Jesus is wearing. God takes bread and wine and transforms it into himself to nurture us with his sacrifice. You see, the thing is part of what early Protestantism had done is it kind of adopted that kind of Gnosticism where baptism's just a sign, and the Zwinglian conception of the Lord's Supper becomes completely divorced from incarnational theology. That these things are things that God himself has set apart to function in an incarnational manner. So when Christ gives thanks, in the Greek it's Eucharistia. We call it the Eucharist. He gives thanks. It says, "This is my body, this is my blood." And just like when he went down into the waters of baptism, he sanctified nature. He sanctified the waters. He set the waters apart to serve as that instrument in the midst of our own baptism. Everything that he did so I think that the more Gnostic leaning, spirit only kind of thinking, it's just not incarnational enough. It's kind of like looking at Christ's divinity but ignoring his humanity. You think I'm okay? I didn't make it explicit, but I think you were implying an apt comparison between the common objection against repeated prayers and iconoclasty. Iconoclasts believe the symbols took you away from God, opposite of the purpose. This is true, and just so with those that oppose formulated prayer. Yeah, so I think my analysis here, it's yeah, I'd only be repeating myself about the what I would refer to as a Gnostic tendency. And I can't blame people for having that tendency because some are influenced by that through some Protestant circles. It's not an uncommon phenomenon. where a person has no problem with seeing, a baby Jesus in a nativity scene, but they'll scoff at, a crucifix with Christ on the cross and not bat an eyelash over it. At some point, like we've been talking about prayer and worship and things like that, and sacraments and church and everything. There is a tendency in some to pit one thing against the other. To pit some of the things I think God has given to us and pit them against Him Himself. So I have a crucifix on my wall in my living room. If I went upstairs right now, knelt on the floor, looked at the crucifix, and prayed while looking at it, there are those who have been influenced in such a way that the very notion makes them feel uncomfortable. It makes them feel like they're engaging in idolatry. But God Himself involves things in the redemptive story. We don't need to be afraid of things. We need to be afraid of a wayward heart. Yes, an idol versus icon. That would be a good way of putting it. So, but yeah, I can understand a person who is growing up in a certain environment where they develop a bias against icons because it's all wrapped up into this spirit only, or you're an idolater, and it's not quite that way. Unfortunately, I think that's a product of bad theology. I think it's just a bit too Gnostic. I personally like iconography. I think I have I think I got I think this fell and broke. And here's a example of an icon. I don't know what particular brand of icon this is, or style, or probably something that you'd find in a Greek Orthodox church, maybe. I got one. I got one for you. So my son told me a few days ago. He said, "Dad, when I pray sometimes..." Be quiet, Nick. Yes, that's it. They're all colonials. Reptilian. Yeah, that's it. My son asked me, or he told me that sometimes when I pray, I don't know whether I'm praying to God or to the devil. Now, that may sound really odd and weird and whatnot, but I understood what he meant. I understood what he meant by that. So I taught him about intent, right? You're not intending to talk to the devil, right? You are intending to talk to God. So if that thought comes in, just remember your intent. What is your intent? Okay. But I also said, if you're having a hard time like that, even when you're telling yourself what your intent is, well, he's still young, okay? He's still feeling the stuff out. I recommended to him to look at a crucifix while you pray to God. Look at a crucifix while you pray to God. I said it's going to be a lot harder for you to think that, oh, I'm just praying to the devil. Or I'm just directing my prayer all over the place. Because when you're looking at a crucifix, it's really hard to think or feel that you're praying to anybody but Jesus. So that's what I said. I said involve more of your senses in the process. And that's okay. Like so some people, like, they can't feel like they're praying unless they close their eyes. You may know a person or two like this. They have to have their eyes closed, or they don't feel that they are praying, right? Well, I'm glad you agree, King, and welcome in, by the way. What was I saying? I'm getting tired. I was saying something. Oh yeah, the praying with the eyes closed thing, yeah. So the one of the early Protestant experiences I had was we always bowed our eyes, bowed our eyes. We bowed our head and we closed our eyes. In fact, I don't even recall if we were directed to close our eyes. I think I recall bowing the head possibly being that, right? You pray differently when you're on your knees than when you're laying on your back in bed. I'm not saying you can't have your heart is only in it when you're on your knees. I'm not saying that. Don't get caught in that trap either. But there's something about having a posture that follows your prayer, that places you in a position of submission, among other meanings behind the action, than if you're just soaking in a bathtub, staring at the ceiling. You know, what was it? In the Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis depicts these demons talking, right? So you have Uncle Screwtape and nephew Wormwood. I forget what chapter it is, and I think it's in the Screwtape Letters, where the trick of the demon was to get this guy who's praying to always look into the same corner of the wall, of the room, the same upper top corner of the room, and get him to feel like he's not praying unless he is in fact looking at the top corner of the room, which is where then he would reside. We shouldn't be afraid to have our eyes open when we pray. In fact, I'll speak from my own personal experience. It was difficult for me to transition to praying with my eyes open because it didn't feel like I was actually praying unless my eyes were closed. Once I got past that feeling, okay, which was kind of drilled into me from my environment, I think I even remember looking around once. Everybody had their eyes closed. Well, okay, must be wrong not to have my eyes closed. But anyways, when I began to look at a crucifix when I prayed, and I was finally able to get away from the kind of rhetoric and narrative of the more iconoclastic attitude, and got away from the I can only pray with my eyes closed thing, and got past the feeling that this is somehow offensive to God. I have to have because I could be distracted. But I'm going to be honest. That was the argument that was told me all the time. But when I close my eyes, my imagination starts going. I find that to be far more distracting for me. So that wasn't helping. So sometimes I would try to imagine in my mind Jesus on this is me as a Protestant. I would try to fix this by imagining Jesus on the cross when I was talking to him. Or imagining Jesus sitting at the right hand of God the Father in my mind. And then I thought, well, what's the difference between me just imagining it in my mind and me actually looking at a crucifix? Because we talked about that a little bit earlier, how it's, why should it matter the medium? Right? If it's pictures in my head or pictures on a piece of paper, it's still a picture. And it's still directing my prayer. It's helping me to focus. Right? My prayer life has actually been greatly enriched, also by, and I've been trying to get in the habit of, there's a 24-hour Eucharistic Adoration Chapel, like 3 minutes from my house. Isn't that amazing? 3 minutes from my house, 24/7. I can go in there. I can sit with our Lord in the Eucharist, and I can look at it, and I can talk to him. And it's not that God isn't with us in other ways, but he's with us through the Eucharist in a sacramental way that is very unique. It's not the spirit-only kind of thing. But God comes to us in a very tangible manner in the Eucharist. Parentheses around tangible. The all is palpable. I go in there and there's just a presence. It's a sacred place. It helps me pray going there. So on my days off from work, I'm trying to get in the habit of going there for a whole hour to sit with our Lord in Eucharistic adoration for a whole hour every day I don't work. Kind of hard to do Eucharistic adoration with your eyes closed. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've been Catholic now for over 10 years. And looking back and seeing how I had those attitudes early on, and how much my faith has been with their eyes closed at Eucharist adoration. You probably have. I just, like, how do you, like, what do? You just picture in your head what's right in front of your eyes, or like what's the thing going on there? I don't know. I just, like, don't you look at it? You know, like Augustine said. He said that my eyes see bread, but my faith sees our Lord. They are in the presence. Hey, fair enough. You know, maybe they think they're not worthy to look upon it. You know, maybe there's something to that. Yeah, I think my take on it would be to involve as many of your senses into the experience as possible. That's how I would formulate that. Not that one couldn't shut their eyes or look down for a moment. God forbid you avert your eyes for 1 second. But yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just tend to want, like, so the Latin Mass I go to has very beautiful Gregorian chant. There's art all around me that I can see. Gregorian chant that I can hear, the incense I can smell. Get the bells, the liturgical garb. I'm kneeling, so I'm engaged in actions. It seems like I could be more present for the moment. No, there's no there's no corner of the room. No, stop that. No. I'm not saying I don't feel like I can't pray unless I'm at Mass with all those things. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying, it makes sense for me to want to surround myself with as much that will draw my attention and all my senses. Right. That I would engage all of myself. Just engage all of myself into it. I guess there's that kind of reciprocity between the act of engaging of a particular thing and the things that are constantly communicating, the things of God, where all of it becomes sacramental in a sense. Remember, we're talking about both and here. We're not talking about. Hey, Attic, welcome in. I will be I got about 5 more minutes. 5 more. Only 5. Like I wear this crucifix all the time. I did a little Journey to Silius practice, but my heart wasn't in it. My heart wasn't in it. And this will probably be my last stream for a little while, too. I found it very helpful, though. This stream today. It helped me stop feeling bad about myself. I do think I should probably do some more talking streams because I don't get to talk with people. I don't get to talk with people very often, so maybe I should do that more often. Oh, sure thing, King. Hey, Spruce. Oh my gosh, it is Spruce. Hey, welcome in. Remote service, very cool. I've been doing alright. Just some random stuff. You know, I go to work, I come home, and then when I stream, I just do whatever I want, I guess. Sometimes I play games. Played some Donkey Kong Jr. Been doing some Journey to Silius. Yeah, the wall of yeah, I've just been doing a lot more random stuff. I've been more of a variety streamer in that way. Sometimes I'll read something on stream, sometimes I'll just talk about current events or something. And sometimes I play games. It just depends on what I feel like doing. That all work, huh? Dang. Well, what a price for that. Sounds like a good deal. You could definitely sell those for right? Yeah, indeed. I still have all my NES consoles. I was thinking about selling some of them because most of them are just boards. I might be able to sell some of them off. I have some of them I've tested. There's some working ones in there. Let me see. I have 72 NES consoles. And mostly bottoms and boards. Yeah, I've got kind of a wall of them over here. I show you. But then I will have to get going here. So. I got a wall of NES boards and bottoms. Some of them are complete. Alright, have a good one, Nick. I don't know. I've sold 2 of them. I sold one to Metroid McFly. Metroid McFly? Yeah. The other one was sold to I think he's one that has me blocked now. Alright, so yeah, Metroid McFly. Sold one to him, and then sold the other one to... Am I even going to remember his name if I saw it? It was for Tecate. Tecate. I couldn't remember. I unfollowed everybody who had me banned in their channel. Because I like to participate. If I can't, then okay, I'll go somewhere else. But yeah, I sold one to Tecate and one to Metroid McFly for Metroid. I found some. I did some testing with the front loaders, where you can power off and power on those consoles, and then you can get a good grade pattern, right? So I helped them out with those things. Yeah, to get the good RNG. Yeah. So I did a video with the console showing that you can get good RNG with this console, and it was good because they didn't want to use the Power Pack or EverDrive to write those values to those RNG related uninitialized memory addresses. That they wanted legit original hardware doing that stuff. So I don't remember how much I sold those for though. Maybe 20. Oh, I also sold one. Sorry, I sold the third one. To Freeland. Yeah, I also sold one to Freeland. So three of them. Yeah. It was good stuff. You're banning you from their chats and whatnot, was just people being super radical. Yeah, people didn't really think much through that stuff, but people cared more about rhetoric and defamation and narratives that paint me as the devil, and they just kind of just swallowed it. Yeah, they didn't like that I was a conservative. Yeah, I'm a traditional Roman Catholic, Latin Mass attending. I'm faithful. Well, I'm a practicing Catholic, right? I still working on it, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think at this point, most people who come in here and stay, they're conservative too, and or also Christian. I also have non-Christian friends who are also conservative. They like to hang out. Yeah. It kind of created a situation where, in a way, I could no longer just be a neutral gaming only kind of guy, because all of the more left-leaning progressive folks generally just abandon the stream, ban me in their own, and which makes it very easy to know, who doesn't want me around. That's easy enough. But it kind of opened up the possibility for me to do something I never would have done. I never would have talked about my Catholic faith on stream. I never would have shared my conservative values on stream, because I just did the gaming stuff. I just kept it to gaming. But now I could do all of those things without any consequences, really. So this is more of a conservative culture here. So I might as well run with it. So what you're telling me is I can be more open on my stream and have no negative consequences for it? Because I probably would have drove people away in bits over time. Yeah. Yeah. It's fine, yeah. I mean, there was a time early on in my streaming where a guy, I can't remember, I think his name was Rasa or something like that. Very early on, me playing NES, just starting out in the living room in the other house, and I remember I had a friend come in here, and he's Christian, and he started talking about sin and the gospel and stuff. He was just talking to me. We were just talking. And Rasa really, really didn't like it. Really didn't like it. And I thought to myself, after he never came back, that, I think I want to stream to a broader audience. And so I want to try to keep it more to the gaming. And so that's why I said, if the most inclusive sort of thing that I could do is to stream to the broadest audience possible, where I just focused on our common interest, right? This one shared focus, because more people can be involved in that, and gaming was why I was on the stream initially anyways. Although sometimes I might end up talking about philosophy or something, but and that's why I kind of went that way. I also had some other experiences too, where I went to a guy's stream and well, I suppose I can tell you it was live on a stream, but Cantaloupe me is an atheist, and when he asked me what my education was in, and I said, I studied theology, right? And he talked about how that was kind of worthless, I mean, it was the way he said it and what he said was kind of demeaning, so he's kind of like an anti-theist in that way. I don't like to throw that out there, but I remember how I felt though about that. It wasn't very welcoming, right? It wasn't very welcoming to me. And I thought, I don't want to do that to other people, because there might be people out there who don't want to hear about theism all the time. Look, fair enough. I'm like, okay, so broadest audience possible. So let's try to work on that, right? Yeah. Yeah. Accept other people for who they are. Yeah. It depends on what you mean by that. You know, I can't compromise my own self in what I accept, but I think your focus is more on just being accepting of other people because they're created in the image and likeness of God, not in the deformation of that image, right? Yeah. That people automatically assume that if you're a Christian conservative, you're the worst person on the planet, which is inaccurate. Correct. In my experience, Christians are some of the nicest people. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you can have nice people all across the board. Now you can find some not very nice people among self-proclaimed Christians as well. Correct. Yes, Bruce. I think I know what you mean. You know, it's like, and I tend to think it's more of a Catholic conception of liberty, and you'll hear it from Catholics like Michael Knowles. I like to listen to Michael Knowles when he talks about that we have liberty means the freedom to do what is right, not to do anything that you want to do. So there's always clarifications, distinctions to be made, because we don't have a right to sin, for instance. We may have the ability to do such a thing, but we don't have like a God-given right to heresy and sin and, you know, deforming the image of God, giving up our dignity, because there's a distinction between liberty and licentiousness. In this case, the licentiousness, sin, actually weakens our will. Right? Vice weakens the will. It ensnares the intellect. It takes away our liberty. We're giving up our liberty in order to become slaves to sin. Yeah. But of course, you know, to build on what you're saying is the kind of, at least in the gaming environment, right? We should just be playing games and talking about games. You know, there's a time and place for conversations and things that of more of a political or religious nature. You know, if you want to talk about philosophy, that's fine. Just outside the gaming milieu. When it comes to gaming, let's just play our games. All right, don't turn the gaming environment into ideological warfare, where we are now policing each other's thoughts and demanding that we have the same ethics. No, you don't get to do that. But of course, these are activists. So for them, it's a moral imperative that they have to get that stuff into everything that they do. They have to use all their platforms for progressive purposes. All right? Nothing is to be untouched. The personal is the political. But the thing is how were we to stop that from occurring? Right? If a person wants to have a non-gaming type conversation with me here, okay, that's fine. Well, whatever. If people don't like it, then go somewhere else. Whatever. See, we're all just going where we want. Wrong think, yeah. Wrong think. That's all misinformation, disinformation. Wrong think. The party's always right. I mean, I can kind of get it to some extent, you know, as a Christian, you know. There's the Great Commission and, you know, Paul had his tent making ministries, and no doubt, if he worked alongside people also making tents with him, he probably had a conversation with the gospel once or twice, but maybe he kept it to work. Who knows? I think when it comes to it, yeah, I'm gonna have those things, and I kind of think that maybe I'd not really fully understanding the political environment. That's fair. That's some ignorance in that. Right. I didn't think that by only having gaming tags and gaming only focus for a team was going to somehow turn into a battle, because once again, for the activists, they have to use everything for their activism. And I said, no, you're not going to use my team for activism. We're just going to talk about games. Heck, that's me not talking about my own stuff. So, people who made it all about them, wait, this is me not preaching on my stream. So it wasn't only... Well, 1 second. All right, it's time to help get the kids ready for school, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not sure how many days I'm going to take off. I'll start with 2. I'll start with 2 days, and then think through what I might want to do. These talking streams are actually helpful to me sometimes, so I might do something along those lines. So, but yeah, thanks for hanging out, Spruce. If it's your first time here and you want to hang out some other time, be sure to follow. You'll get notifications. Otherwise, I'll just see you guys when I stream next, right? So, very cool. Very cool. All right, folks. Have a good day. See if I can host somebody here. Hey, thanks for the week. Really enjoy your talking streams. Oh, well, thanks. Thanks, Savage. Yeah. I think I'm a talker. I just think that the best way for me to deal with stuff is just to talk. I need to talk. Slim pickings here for